The early evening light filtered through the canopy of oak trees in Riverside Park, casting dappled shadows across the walking paths. It was that perfect time in late spring when the air held just enough warmth to be comfortable, and the breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers. Sarah Mitchell sat on her usual bench, the one with the slightly faded paint and the view of the playground, watching her charge play on the swings. At 26, Sarah had been working as a nanny for 3 years, and she'd learned to appreciate these quiet moments in the park. They were often the calmest part of her day. She was employed by the Henderson family, caring for their twin boys, who were currently engaged in an elaborate game involving superheroes and imaginary villains. Sarah kept one eye on them while reviewing her grocery list for tomorrow's meals. The pay wasn't spectacular, but the Hendersons were kind and the work was steady. In a city as expensive as Boston, that counted for something. She heard the crying before she saw where it was coming from. A child's distressed sobs, the kind that spoke of genuine fear rather than a simple tumble or scraped knee. Sarah's professional instincts kicked in immediately. She stood, scanning the playground, and spotted a little girl sitting alone on a bench about 30 feet away, her small body shaking with tears. The child appeared to be about 5 or 6 years old, with light brown hair pulled into a ponytail that had come partially loose. She wore a pink dress and clutched a stuffed rabbit to her chest. What struck Sarah most was that the girl was completely alone. No parent or caregiver in sight. Sarah glanced back at the Henderson twins, who were safely occupied and within her line of sight, then made her way over to the crying child. "Hello, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, kneeling down to the girl's eye level but maintaining a respectful distance. "My name is Sarah. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" The little girl looked up at her with tear-filled eyes, shaking her head. "I can't find my daddy," she managed between sobs. "He was right there, and then I looked away, and now he's gone." Sarah's heart clenched with sympathy. She knew that particular terror well. She'd experienced it herself as a child once in a department store. "Oh, honey, I'm sure he's looking for you right now," Sarah said soothingly. "Tell me your name." "Mia," the girl whispered, hiccuping slightly. "Mia Cartwright." "That's a beautiful name," Sarah said warmly. "Mia, I promise we're going to find your daddy. He's probably searching for you this very minute, and I bet he's just as worried as you are. Can you tell me what he looks like?" Before Mia could answer, Sarah noticed a man in a dark suit walking quickly along one of the paths, his head turning from side to side, his expression tense with worry. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the barely controlled panic in his movements. "Is that him?" Sarah asked, pointing. Mia's head whipped around and her face transformed with relief. "Daddy!" The man's gaze snapped toward them at the sound of his daughter's voice, and he broke into a run. He was tall, probably in his late 30s, with dark hair and sharp features that might have been handsome, if they weren't currently etched with such obvious distress. "Mia!" he called out, his voice rough with emotion. He reached them in seconds, immediately dropping to his knees and pulling his daughter into a tight embrace. Mia buried her face in his shoulder, her earlier tears giving way to the shuddering breaths that come after crying hard. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I only walked a few steps away to take that phone call, and when I turned around, you were gone. I was so scared." Sarah stood quietly, giving them their moment. She watched as the man held his daughter, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped securely around her small frame. Whatever else he might be, he was clearly a devoted father. After a moment, he looked up at Sarah, and she was struck by the intensity of his gray eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice still thick with emotion. "Thank you for staying with her." "Of course," Sarah said simply. She was frightened, and I couldn't just walk past. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'm a nanny. I was watching my charges over there when I heard Mia crying." The man stood, keeping Mia in his arms even though she was clearly getting a bit big to be carried. He seemed reluctant to put her down, as if reassuring himself that she was really safe. "I'm Daniel Cartwright," he said, "and I can't thank you enough. I only looked away for a moment, but in a city this size—" He trailed off, not wanting to voice the terrible possibilities out loud in front of his daughter. "Children can move surprisingly fast," Sarah said gently, trying to ease his obvious guilt. "And you found each other. That's what matters." Daniel shifted Mia slightly in his arms, and Sarah noticed the expensive cut of his suit, the quality of his watch. The name Cartwright suddenly clicked in her mind. She'd seen it in the business section of the newspaper. Daniel Cartwright was the CEO of Cartwright Technologies, one of the most successful software companies in the region. She'd had no idea. "I should get back to my boys," Sarah said, gesturing toward the playground where the Henderson twins were now engaged in a serious discussion about the rules of their game. "I'm glad everything worked out." "Wait," Daniel said quickly. "Please, could I at least buy you a coffee or something? As a thank you?" Sarah hesitated. In her experience, wealthy people didn't usually seek out the company of nannies, and she wasn't sure what to make of the offer. Daniel seemed to sense her uncertainty. "I'm sorry, that was presumptuous. You were very kind to Mia, and I'd like to properly thank you, but I understand if you need to get back to work." "It's not that," Sarah said. "It's just that I really didn't do anything special. Any decent person would have done the same." "Maybe," Daniel said, "but you're the one who did. And in my experience, kindness should be acknowledged." He paused, then added, "Also, Mia seems quite taken with you. And she doesn't warm up to strangers easily." Sarah looked at the little girl, who had stopped crying entirely and was now watching Sarah with interest, her stuffed rabbit still clutched in one arm. "I like your rabbit," Sarah told Mia with a warm smile. "What's its name?" "Mimi," Mia said softly. "Because it sounds like my name." "That's very clever," Sarah said. "I had a stuffed bear when I was your age. His name was Mr. Buttons because he had button eyes." Mia smiled a little at that, and Daniel's expression softened as he watched the interaction. "How about this?" Daniel suggested. "There's a cafe just outside the park entrance. Could I buy you a coffee to go? It would only take a minute, and I promise I'm not trying to be weird or anything. I'd like to do something to thank you." Sarah found herself nodding. There was something genuine about Daniel Cartwright that put her at ease. Despite his obvious wealth and status, he didn't have the entitled air she'd encountered in some of the wealthy parents she'd met through her work. "All right," she agreed. "But I really do need to keep an eye on the twins." "Of course," Daniel said. "We'll walk with you." They made their way back to where the Henderson boys were playing, and Sarah introduced them briefly. Then the small group headed toward the park exit, where a small cafe sat on the corner. Daniel insisted on buying Sarah not just coffee but also a pastry, and he got hot chocolate and cookies for both Mia and the twins, who were thrilled with this unexpected treat. They all sat at one of the outdoor tables, where Sarah could still supervise the children, while they ate their cookies and chattered among themselves. "So you're a nanny?" Daniel asked, seeming genuinely interested rather than condescending. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "For about 3 years now. I studied early childhood education in college, and I really love working with children. The pay isn't great, but the work is meaningful." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Mia's nanny quit about 3 weeks ago," he said quietly, so his daughter wouldn't overhear. "It's been challenging. I'm working with an agency to find someone new. But in the meantime, I'm trying to manage work and parenting. And as you saw today, it's not going particularly well. Taking care of a child while working a demanding job is incredibly difficult," Sarah said sympathetically. "Especially on your own." She paused, then added carefully, "I assume you're on your own? Forgive me if that's too personal." "No, it's fine," Daniel said, though a shadow passed over his face. "My wife passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. It was very fast. Only 6 months from diagnosis to—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said sincerely. "That must have been devastating. For both of you." "It was," Daniel said quietly. "We had a nanny then, someone who'd been with us since Mia was born. She was wonderful, like family, really. But she retired last year and her replacement just wasn't the right fit. The woman was competent enough, but there was no warmth there. No real connection with Mia, and in the end, she left for a position that paid more." He looked over at his daughter, who was sharing her cookie with the Henderson twins and laughing at something one of them said. "Mia's been struggling," Daniel continued. "She has nightmares sometimes about losing me like she lost her mother. That's why today scared her so much. She thought it was happening again." Sarah felt her heart ache for the little girl. That's a heavy burden for such a young child to carry. "It is," Daniel agreed. I'm doing everything I can to help her feel secure, but I'm also running a company with 3,000 employees. The balance is—" He shook his head. "Well, you saw how well I'm managing it today." "You made a mistake," Sarah said gently. "You're human. It doesn't make you a bad father. The fact that you're so torn up about it actually proves you're a good one." Daniel looked at her with something like gratitude in his eyes. "You're very kind, and very wise for someone so young." Sarah laughed. "I'm 26, not 16. And I've been working with children and families long enough to see that perfect parenting is a myth. We're all just doing our best." They talked for a while longer, and Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying Daniel's company. He was intelligent and thoughtful, with a self-deprecating sense of humor that emerged once he'd relaxed a bit. He asked her questions about her work, about her philosophy on childcare, and seemed to genuinely value her answers. Eventually, Sarah glanced at her watch and realized it was getting late. "I need to get the boys home for dinner," she said apologetically. "Of course," Daniel said, standing. "Thank you again, Sarah, for everything." "It was truly my pleasure," Sarah said, meaning it. As she gathered the Henderson twins and prepared to leave, Mia ran up to her and threw her small arms around Sarah's waist. "Thank you for finding me," Mia said, her voice muffled against Sarah's sweater. Sarah knelt down and hugged the little girl properly. "You're very welcome, sweetheart. You're very brave, you know that?" Mia smiled shyly, then ran back to her father. Daniel gave Sarah a final wave as they parted ways, and Sarah couldn't help but look back once as she walked away with the twins. She saw Daniel lift Mia onto his shoulders, heard the little girl's delighted laugh, and felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the evening sun. She didn't expect to see them again. Boston was a big city, and their paths had crossed by pure chance. But 2 days later, as Sarah was reviewing her email on her phone during the twins' nap time, she found a message that made her pause. The subject line read, "Job Opportunity, Cartwright Family." Sarah opened it with curiosity and found a professionally written message from Daniel Cartwright. He explained that after their conversation in the park, he thought a great deal about what Mia needed. He was looking for someone who wouldn't just supervise his daughter, but would genuinely care for her. Someone with warmth and patience and the kind of natural kindness Sarah had demonstrated. He was offering her a position as Mia's nanny. The salary he quoted was nearly double what she currently made, with full benefits, paid vacation, and a housing stipend if she needed it. The hours would be challenging. He needed someone who could be flexible, given his demanding schedule. But he was clear that he would respect her time off and never take her work for granted. Sarah stared at the email for a long time, her heart beating faster. It was an incredible opportunity. The money alone would change her life. She could finally afford to move out of her cramped studio apartment, maybe even start saving for the future. But more than that, she'd felt a genuine connection with Mia, a desire to help that little girl heal from her grief and feel secure again. But what about the Henderson family? They'd been good to her, and she hated the idea of leaving them in the lurch. Sarah spent the evening thinking about it, weighing her options. The next morning, she sent Daniel a reply asking if they could meet to discuss the position in more detail. He responded within an hour, suggesting a cafe near his office for the following afternoon. When Sarah arrived at the meeting, Daniel was already there, dressed in another impeccable suit, but looking somehow more approachable than he had in the park. He stood when he saw her and extended his hand. "Sarah, thank you for coming." They ordered coffee and settled into a quiet corner table. Daniel was direct but thoughtful as he outlined what the position would entail. "I'm not going to pretend this would be an easy job," he said honestly. "My schedule is unpredictable. I travel sometimes, though I try to minimize it. There are evening events I have to attend, and Mia, as much as I love her, is going through a difficult time. She can be withdrawn or clingy, and she still has those nightmares I mentioned." "I understand," Sarah said. "Grief is complicated, especially for children. They don't always have the words to express what they're feeling." "Exactly," Daniel said, looking relieved that she understood. "I'm not looking for someone to just keep her fed and safe, though obviously those things are important. I need someone who will help her heal, someone patient and warm and genuinely caring." He paused, then added, "I know that's asking a lot, and I know we barely know each other, but something about the way you handled the situation in the park. The way you spoke to Mia, the way you talked about children and families. I just had a strong feeling that you might be exactly what she needs." Sarah felt touched by his words. "I'm interested," she admitted. "Very interested, actually. But I do have some questions and some concerns." "Of course," Daniel said. "Please ask anything." They spent the next hour discussing the details. Sarah asked about Mia's routine, her interests, her struggles. She asked about Daniel's expectations, about boundaries, about what kind of relationship he envisioned between his family and their nanny. Daniel was candid in his responses. He made it clear that while he valued professionalism, he also hoped for someone who would become a trusted part of their small family unit. He wasn't looking for someone who would remain emotionally distant. "My wife, Lauren, she believed that it takes a village to raise a child," Daniel said, his voice soft when he mentioned his late wife. "She always said that the more people who genuinely love and care for Mia, the richer her life would be."